What is your name?
Air Metz.
Pardon me?
Air Metz.
Oh,
We're going to ask, we can't make you leave the room, but we're going to ask that you leave the room so that you don't have an advantage over other people that are hearing questions for the first time.
Very well.
We'll call you in when it's time for your interview.
You didn't know, but
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest in District 2 Alderman position. We'll be asking you a list of pre-selected questions. We have allocated 20 minutes for each of our candidates for the interview. And we're conducting 8 of the interviews this evening and 1 on Thursday evening to accommodate the candidate. You're welcome to stay after your interview to observe the rest of the interviews, but we would ask that you do not share the question asked tonight until after Thursday, because that's when the last interview will take place. Once all the interviews are completed on Thursday, the committee will decide the next step in the process, which could range anywhere from selecting the final person for appointment by the Common Council or narrowing it down for additional interviews. Rebecca Grill is our city administrator and Steve Bratz is our city clerk, and they will be the people that will be contacting you regarding the next steps in this process. Please be cognizant of the limit, 20 minutes that we have for your interview, and provide concise answers to the questions that we will pose. The first question will be posed by our Common Council President, Tom Lysick.
How do you view the role of an alderperson?
As a representative of the district. So, I mean, there's 2 ways you can sort of look at it. On the one hand, an alderman or a representative is chosen to represent the district and exercise judgment, but also ultimately to represent the wishes of the people in the district. And I think there's a balance between those 2 things. Now, this is an appointed position, not an elected, so it's a little different in that regard. But certainly, I would view my role as to actually represent the people of the district, to understand and get to understand better what it is they're concerned about, what they feel on various issues, and represent those things before the city council. So again, representation is obviously the key piece of it.
Aaron, what characteristics, qualifications, and experiences do you possess that make you the most viable candidate for the position?
Well, I've not served on government at any level, but I've served in various governing bodies as an academic, church council, things like that. I certainly just came out of a faculty meeting that lasted 2 hours. So I understand procedure, I understand how government works. I've been studying it, in fact, pretty much my entire adult life, and teach the history of government more than anything else. So I think I understand certainly American government, its history, what it does, what it is meant to do, probably better than most, but again, that's just my academic background and training. And I've had experience in representative institutions since I was in college in student government, as a senator or assemblyman or what have you.
Aaron, have you ever previously considered running for alderperson? If you have any, why haven't you tried?
I haven't really thought about it too much. I mean, you know, the idea of running for office hasn't been something I've done. When this opened up, I looked at it as a possible opportunity to get into something. I've always been interested in government, obviously. That's sort of what I've been writing about and studying for my career. So I suppose when I became aware of the opening, it was more, well, finally here's possibly a way to get into it. But no, I've never run for office outside of student government. I ran for several elections at UW-Oshkosh, which, you know, is a different thing, obviously, but believe me, certainly not uncontentious.
Thank you.
What do you feel is the most significant shortcomings of our council right now?
Well, I don't know that there's a lot of shortcomings of the council. I feel that the city government in West Allis is pretty well run. Again, I think I've not lived in West Allis a terribly long time. I'm a lifelong resident of Wisconsin in the area. that might bring a different perspective to it. But I don't see particularly any shortcomings of the city council particularly.
The city is in a stage of redevelopment. What areas in District 2 do you believe have the greatest need? And do you feel the Common Council has correctly handled economic development in the city as a whole?
I think on the whole, we've done a pretty good job of encouraging development. There's some really big things happening. I mean, there's certainly more that could be done, and I would be in favor of doing whatever we can to develop areas. Now, in my district, I think, generally speaking, things are relatively good, but you look at a lot of the more dilapidated properties, there's just so many duplexes where you have especially absentee owners. I think that's a real problem that has to be addressed. And I think one way you do that is through vigorous enforcement of the city code. But, looking at that, I see that as an issue. The Alice Chalmers area is certainly a place that's really ripe for redevelopment, and that seems to be going forward. So certainly whatever can be done to encourage the redevelopment of like the 70th Street corridor would be extremely useful. But again, I think a lot of it in the residential areas has to do with enforcing code and dealing with landlords who don't live here and don't really care about the community and are not keeping up their properties or renting them ultimately to people who cause trouble here. And certainly we've seen a lot of that in my neighborhood. I live in fact next to a house that is basically an abandoned property, and the owner is nowhere to be seen. So that's the kind of thing I'd like to see a lot more action done on to make the city more desirable then for people who can look at West Allis as a first choice place to come and raise a family and do so affordably and safely.
Aaron, do you understand the time commitment required for an older person with meetings, constituent interactions, general community involvement? And do you have the time and flexibility to accommodate the schedule?
Yeah, I understand, and I think I certainly do. I mean, not that I don't work hard at my job, but my job offers a schedule that is very flexible. Being a college professor, certainly I'm not teaching classes in the summer. I'm not teaching classes a month in the winter. And being a single person too, I don't have a wife and children I have to worry about. I have the time available to do it, and one approach I certainly would take is being very available to constituents through, certainly social media, but I think that's not the only way you do it. I would like to have office hours at some public location a couple times a week if people want to come talk to me. But being available, going from house to house even at some point and just saying, hi, I'm your new alderperson. I'm willing to put in whatever time it takes on committees, with council meetings and so forth. So, understood and not a problem.
Aaron, do you have any conflict of interest that we should be aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, no. I don't work for any government agency or any agency that receives support from the government. My employer is Wisconsin Lutheran College, which is a nonprofit organization in Wauwatosa, and it's kind of weird, our campus is in Wauwatosa and Milwaukee, but no, not that I know of.
There you go.
Is there anything in your background that may come up for which you basically would like to provide us an explanation?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't have a criminal record except a speeding ticket about 20 years ago. So if you want to talk about that, we can. But no, thankfully I have not had any trouble in that regard. So I'm pretty boring. So.
What is your opinion of the city budget and taxes, and do you have any ideas to share?
Well, as a property tax payer, I'm not thrilled with high property taxes, but such is the case everywhere. And for us, I think one of our big disadvantages, if you look at Brookfield or Wauwatosa, they have so much commercial property that they, especially like Brookfield or New Berlin, does not have to have necessarily the high residential taxes that we do. And I think the more development we have of commercial development, especially things that can pay, sustaining wages for a family, the more we can at least keep taxes at a certain level. I mean, on the other hand, you've got to have city services, and to make a city attractive, you have to be able to provide the things that people expect. So you can't necessarily keep raising your taxes as a way to meet those things, but you can't cut the taxes down to the point where you can't provide services. So to me, growth is the solution, and again, it has a lot to do with redevelopment, especially going after commercial developments and filling some of these holes we have, like the Sam's Club and the Pick and Save on 108th, and these, some of the dead sites that are still gonna be left over by the old Alice Chalmers, even when the 6 Points goes in. But kind of aggressively going after that and seeking commercial development is, to me, the best way to provide property tax relief. Certainly, I'm all for frugality in terms of doing what we do as efficiently as possible, not necessarily being cheap in terms of providing bad service. But if there are ways we can have efficiency, certainly that's something that we need to do.
Aaron, how would you as an older person support the strategic plan goals, mission, and vision of the city?
Well, I think, when you look at that, and I read through it over the weekend, of course, West Allis has a certain image. And I personally like West Allis in a lot of ways, the way it is. It reminds me of the place I grew up in some ways in Appleton. But of course, you will have to market the city, especially again to get commercial development. So I certainly want to see that kind of thing continue. Making the city ultimately a first choice place for businesses, families, and those things. I think that's done by dealing with some of the blighted areas we see, the blighted properties that I mentioned, certainly to encouraging development, controlling crime. And, I live in the city and I haven't had major problems with crime personally, but it's not that it's not there, and it's certainly present in our neighborhood. I found, for example, dirty used needles laying in my alley behind my garage, so something's going on here. So I certainly would like to see more support for our police to make this, again, a really safe city that's affordable, that people want to come to. Part of that is the schools, and I know part of that is outside of the city's ability, obviously, to address, but all of these pieces fit together, and I think the plan that I read has a good overall vision of that going forward. Sort of with one caveat, maybe. I don't think this city is ever going to be, in a sense, we're not going to be Tosa, we're not going to be Brookfield or New Berlin. We have a different identity, and that's fine. I think that's actually good in a sense. I've been in places where there's a sort of gentrification model that can be painful, to say the least. I think keeping in mind the idea that this is a middle-class city, a working-class city, that certainly can stand to see some improvements in a lot of areas. But keeping that identity is something I would be in favor of. Again, an affordable, good place for working people to live, which is what this city has always been.
Aaron, describe a time where you have experienced or exercised discretionary judgment or an issue or task that was before you.
Well, I am chair of the history department at Wisconsin Lutheran College. I'm director of the honors program, and these things kind of come all the time. Just one example is a few years ago we had a student who had repeatedly committed acts of plagiarism, essentially academic dishonesty. And it was very hard because I liked him and he was someone I'd known for 3 years, but we had to remove him from the history program. We just couldn't allow him to continue and trust that this wasn't going to keep happening. That was one of the hardest things we've had to do, and those are the kinds of decisions as a department head I have to make routinely. I don't like making them, but ultimately somebody has to, and I find that I'm usually pretty decisive with these things. That's just a small example of the kind of thing we deal with. Also, budget issues certainly is something that we deal with on a regular basis. So, where is the money going to come from? And it's always tight at the college. And having to make decisions about whether or not we're going to hire this person or that person or even keep a certain person is things that I've been involved with. So difficult decisions are nothing new to me necessarily.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you would like to share with the committee at this time?
I haven't lived in West Allis for very long, only a few years. I've lived here in Wisconsin 37 years and in Milwaukee area for about 15, worked at the college for 13 years. I chose to live here 2 years ago when I bought a house. Could have bought a house anywhere, and I bought a house here because of the things I said. I like the identity of the town. I like the affordability of the city. I think it has nothing but potential. And I would like to be someone involved with helping to push that potential forward in whatever way I can. So my interest is really not here in any kind of personal gain. Believe me, I don't need another job. It's that I think I have the ability to represent the people of the district well, and would like the opportunity to do so.
Well, we thank you again for your interest in this position, and obviously we'll be in contact with you sometime after the final interview on Thursday. And so we look forward to seeing you again.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, wait. Is there any alderman that would like to ask a question of Aaron? We do have time available. No question.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks again.